Before you know it, we could actually be looking at an Apple event in less than a month. It's possibly that soon. Let's begin. So just as a reminder for those of you who are new, because some people forget this every year, but March events are not an annual thing. Sometimes Apple does spring events, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they even have personalized March events that are not live streamed, that they hold at like schools and don't broadcast them everywhere, but you can watch them after the fact, which is weird, but it's been done as recent as 2018. And sometimes they just do a bunch of site refreshes. So in March of 2019, we had the whole services event, which I'm always trying to forget happened. In 2020, there wasn't a March event, but there was a site refresh where they brought the 2020 iPad Pro and the Magic Keyboard case. And some people thought there was going to be a March event last year, but there was really never any concrete evidence that it was planned. In March of 2017, there was just a site refresh where there was a red iPhone 7, the new budget iPad, and then there was one of the shortest Apple events ever in March of 2016 where they unveiled the original iPhone SE and the 9.7-inch iPad Pro. But since then, there have been much shorter Apple events, like the M1 Mac event in November was under 45 minutes. So knowing how event happy Apple has gotten in most recent history, you know, how they had September event, October event, November event, and they did an AirPods Max site refresh, it wouldn't shock me to know that in 2021, Apple decided to have a small, probably not super eventful March keynote where essentially they could unveil a handful of things, but it's easy for us to get all caught up in the rumors and leaks that people are talking about right now and assuming everything is launching at this one event. But it's important to keep your expectations realistic about this, because the key thing to remember here is March events are always pretty boring. They usually don't have much going on because there's bigger stuff that they want to announce at Quadruple UDC, which does happen every year, or they want to postpone it to be alongside the iPhone launch, which is rumored to be September of this year, probably not going to be delayed like it was last year. So what should we expect at this potential March event? For one, a lot of rumors and analysts seem to all be agreeing on some type of iPad Pro refresh, which is actually a bit interesting to me because in recent history, Apple has always had usually over a year in between each iPad Pro launch, typically a year to 18 months. And this would be the first time, I think, ever that Apple would refresh the iPad Pro simply 12 months after the last refresh, which is pretty quick. But if you consider the 2020 iPad Pro refresh, safe to say it was kind of a S upgrade. It was like, ooh, LiDAR, and the A12Z chip, which is basically the A12X chip, just with less binning involved. So yeah, it was a minor refresh, which is why perhaps refreshing it again a year later is not too crazy to think about. And probably the most exciting development with these new iPad Pros would be the mini LED display, which unfortunately is only rumored to be coming to the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, not the 11-inch, which is a little bit interesting. I'm kind of confused why they can only do it on the larger one and not the smaller one, and also what that says for the lineup. Does that mean the 12.9-inch iPad Pro is going to be more expensive? Yeah, let's hope not. Outside of that mini LED on the larger variant, though, you should expect them to look pretty much the same. No massive redesigns to be expected, but probably a newer CPU on the inside that won't just be a modified A12Z chip. A lot of people are speculating that it's going to be an A14X chip, and this one will be leaps and bounds better than the last iPad Pro CPU. In fact, so much better that it will probably be pretty close in performance to the recently unveiled Apple M1 chip, which I've made videos about in the past. A lot of people disagree with me on this, but for simplicity's sake, I would like them to just put the M1 chip in the iPad Pro. If they're willing to put it in Mac Minis and MacBooks with fans and MacBooks without fans, why stop there? You know, if we're going to have another 5nm chip that's going to be stuffed into, you know, 11 and 13-inch displays, why call it A14X if the performance is going to be almost identical of the M1? Maybe it's just the M1 without a Thunderbolt controller, because the iPad Pros don't have Thunderbolt. But I wish they would. Anyway, the good news is these new iPad Pros probably are going to still work with your old Magic Keyboard cases, so you don't have to buy a new one. If they do make you buy a new one, that's messed up, and I'm instantly out on the purchase entirely at that point. But I'm just hoping that there can be some beefed up hardware on the inside that could allow Apple to potentially run some high-class productivity apps that are currently only available on the Mac, but now that they've been optimized to run on Apple Silicon with the M1, and the iPad has a keyboard and a trackpad, why not just, you know, take some of those apps, start letting them run on the iPad. Some people have been saying RAM is the limitation, which is why with this iPad Pro refresh, I'm kind of in favor of them beefing up the RAM, beefing up the specs a bit. Do whatever you need to do to put Final Cut on there. That's my viewpoint on the subject. And also, for the longest time, it's been rumored that the iPad Pros coming out this year are gonna have they're gonna have 5G support, which I don't care about. I don't even buy the cellular iPads in the first place. So let's just move on from that subject as quickly as possible. The other potential launch that we could end up seeing is maybe some new Apple Silicon in new MacBooks. This one is a confusing one to me because at the same time we're hearing about, M1X chip performance getting leaked on CPU Monkey. Very hard to know if that's fake or real. So it's hard to say that's like a confirmed thing, but there were a lot of reports saying that within the first or second quarter of this year, Apple would be launching more Apple Silicon Macs. Given the last launch was in November, it definitely feels weird that they wouldn't do anything with Apple Silicon until June. So having some kind of mid-cycle refresh makes me think probably this isn't the MacBook redesign we've been hearing about. MacBooks that have legacy ports and have mini LED. I could be wrong on this, but I have a feeling that that's going to be later than people think. I know a lot of rumors right now are saying that the MacBook Pro redesign is coming later this year, but I have a feeling we're going to get small spec boosts, transitioning away from Intel with the MacBooks this year, and then we won't actually see the redesign until next year. It's just a hunch, especially when it comes to mini LED. People have been known to think it's coming sooner than it actually is. So that's why I think potentially at this March event, we might just see like 1 or 2 13-inch MacBook Pros, the ones that have 4 USB-C ports, not 2. Those get some updated Apple Silicon with the M1X processor, which is going to be even faster than the M1, but maybe only available on that one MacBook Pro, and they won't necessarily bring it to the 16-inch MacBook Pro just yet. I want it to come out on everything as soon as possible, don't get me wrong, but it's a March event, and I feel like if they had that many exciting updates for the MacBook Pro, they would probably be the kind of company to just postpone it till June anyway, so they have more to talk about. And as you guys know, I've been fanboying over the iMac redesign for years now, literally years. I've wanted an iPad Pro on a stick as long as we can remember, and unfortunately Bloomberg just came forward and said we probably aren't going to see the 2021 iMac refresh until the end of this year, which makes me so dang depressed, and it gives me a headache because I'm kind of getting sick of looking at the same old iMac every day, and I'm sick of using Intel processors. I want to make the switch to Apple Silicon, but I don't want a Mac Mini. I want the big iMac redesign with a chip way more powerful than the M1, because the next Mac I buy, I plan on keeping for a long time, so I want to future-proof it as best I can, and I don't want to be saying this, but I feel like I have to. You probably should not expect any redesigned iMacs to come out at this March event, which sucks, I know, because I want one so bad, but it's just, whenever a leaker or an analyst says that something isn't coming till later, I feel like those reports usually end up being a lot more accurate, because what leakers will say and what actually happens usually always tend to be on completely different levels. Yeah, Apple's gonna release a plane next year, and then it doesn't happen, but whenever there's leakers saying like, oh, this is further away than we think, or actually this has been postponed, it's not coming out for a while, that's typically when they end up being more correct. And Mark Gurman has a decent track record, so I'm inclined to believe this report. I don't want to, but the logical part of my brain is like, sorry, Drew, it's not gonna happen. Either way though, an M1X chip in just a standard 13-inch MacBook Pro would be very exciting to see. And on top of that, we say this with every event rumors video, but AirTags. They've been referenced since 2019. We heard them referenced throughout all of 2020, and before every single event, there was always someone saying, oh, we're gonna see AirTags, we're gonna see AirTags. Here we are again. Now it's like, okay, maybe this time we'll see AirTags, but it's turned into the boy who cried wolf situation where I'm like, you know what? We've been saying this for like 7 keynotes in a row, so that's why I'm just gonna believe it when I see it and not hold my breath, because I feel like if Apple wanted to unveil and launch AirTags by now, especially knowing they were referencing them in like iOS support code basically over a year ago, if they wanted to unveil them, they could have. They just haven't for some reason, and my guess is the reason is because it's the pandemic and people aren't going out and about as much, so Apple just feels like there's not much reason to launch them right now, and I feel like that situation hasn't necessarily changed, so they're just going to keep leaving them on the shelf and waiting to unveil them at a certain time. So it could be at this event, I'm not saying it won't be, but I'm just saying, man, we have been expecting these things for a long time. Can we just get it over with, please? It feels like AirTags have been around for like a year and they still haven't unveiled them, so maybe the Samsung Galaxy Smart AirTags has incentivized Apple to be like, oh god, okay, now we're gonna look like the copycats, so let's just unveil these things now, get it over with. Probably gonna be priced a little bit more than everyone is comfortable spending. But that's pretty much it. Keep in mind, every time I do one of these, like what's rumored to happen at an Apple event, usually one or two of the things I talk about end up not happening, and more recently, especially, Apple's had a track record of not releasing things that people thought they were going to release. So keep that in mind moving forward. March events are statistically known for being boring. Most likely this is just going to be an iPad Pro event, and that's about it. There's no rumors of like a limited edition product red iPhone 12 Pro coming out. That would be cool. I hope it does, but nothing I've read so far. And let's hope we at least get some Apple Silicon in some more Macs, because we got to get this Intel Mac lineup out of the website, out of the Apple Store as quickly as humanly possible. So let's do it. Thank you all for watching. This is your Apple Sheep here. See you in the next one.